Department of Commerce, and I guess my question is, with the falling demand for U.S. trade, and as well as the high dollar value, I know there's been issues at the seaports, in particular when it comes to deep water ports and also union troubles. Do you really think that's affecting exports this past year and into the future?
I can take a crack at that one. So here's what happens when you have, particularly in LA Long Beach, is where you traditionally get some of these labor issues. The fastest growing seaports in the US last year were Savannah and Charleston. Savannah, why? Because if those ships could not get into LA Long Beach, they'd come through the canal and come around to Savannah. Savannah's, I would say, if you look at the roughly 4 dozen customs districts in the United States, about, I'm going to just take a guess here, 30 to 35 of them, China is either their top trade partner or their second leading trade partner. So what happens when there's labor issues, that trade has to, the ship's got to go somewhere, so they just come to a different port. On the other question, it seems like a similar question, but it's more, I think it is more of a currency question, so I might defer to an economist if he wants. But I think when you see currency situations like you're seeing now, I live in Miami, and the Brazilian currency is, and even the Colombian currencies are greatly devalued, and that's having a big effect on that trade. But if you want to talk a little bit more about currencies, Milan?
Yeah, I can. So first, before I answer your question, I just want to make a point from an earlier question I had. So the conservative think tank is the American Action Forum that did the scoring for those policy positions. In terms of the first question you asked on the disruption, what we've seen in the economic data, it's always temporary. If you recall last year, I think the Q1 of last year, part of the sharp fall off we saw in economic growth was because of the strike that we had in California. So, and that did rebound the following quarter. From a currency perspective, yes, that can have an impact. And in fact, what we've seen since last year, when we had that huge run up in the US dollar, that export did fall, and I have a chart in my presentation deck that shows the correlation between the value of the US dollar and export activity, and also import activity, because it certainly makes imports cheaper when the US dollar appreciates. What that means is that has important policy implication, and that's one of the reasons why I think the Federal Reserve has been as accommodative as they have been over the past year. So there always and invariably will be a policy response of some sort to ameliorate the impact, and hence since the beginning of this year we've seen the dollar ease off the heights that we have. So yes, it has a meaningful impact, and much of what we've seen globally is all part of that depreciation thrust by other countries as they jockey for position and try this beggar thy neighbor policy. The ECB, for example, when they engage in quantitative easing, the key thrust is to weaken the euro. Similarly for the Japanese yen, but as I said earlier, they have been less successful in that because of the appeal of the Japanese yen as a safe haven currency.
Thank you. My name is Drew Dushkus, Georgetown University. There's so much focus in the U.S. these days on trade agreements, but if you look at TPP as an example, it's only going to deliver a few percentage points of growth, depending on how conservative the estimate is. Are there other areas that the U.S. should be looking at, or better areas to improve trade facilitation?
It depends on the study that you see, and yes, I know the ICT study in regards to a few percent. There was no services numbers in there, or minimal services numbers in there in regards to that. So I would tell you that why I said the next agreement that's at our doorstep is here. Our position is not to start thinking about another trade agreement, but take what you've ambitiously done, even though it may not be 100% of what you expected, and create that new floor to build off of. It's 40% of the global GDP. Getting that right and getting it passed, getting it over the finish line and building from there is what's important. There are a lot of provisions in that actually create the opportunities that we've all been speaking to for the last number of years. So start with that, build off of it is our position.
I'll probably just add one thing. When you say it's a few percentage point added to GDP, that's huge. That small percentage point on a $15 trillion economy, that's huge numbers we're talking about. It certainly helps, and Vietnam, for example, as I showed in the chart, would benefit more from it. But what that means is that as the Vietnam economy grows, they're going to demand US goods at some point. So there's that feedback loop with the promotion of trade, which provides a modest gain to US growth. But if it raises global economic activity and global growth, it will also raise global demand. And that would have a feedback loop for US goods.
And I'll just close with 2 points, and I'm sure someone in the audience will know these numbers better than I do, but there's roughly, what, 15 nations in TPP? How many? 12, okay, so I'm off 3. But we already have free trade agreements with how many of those? 5 or new. So we've already got it with 7, and they're very large ones. So to some extent, I think what TPP is a hedge against China. And it's very important for that as well. But part of the reason you don't see so much growth maybe is because we already have free trade agreements with 7 of those nations, including Canada and Mexico, which are quite large. So.